Welcome to EY India Insights. In this episode, we explore how competitive compensation is reshaping the future of pay and why it's become a strategic priority for organizations today. Joining us is Abhishek Sen, partner of People Advisory Services at EY India, who shares perspectives on how pay models are evolving and what leaders should keep in mind going forward. Thank you so much, Abhishek, for joining us today, and a very warm welcome to you.
Thank you, Pallavi.
So, Abhishek, to begin with, what are the key forces reshaping compensation today, and how are organizations moving beyond the traditional pay models towards skill based, performance linked, and data driven compensation strategies?
So, pay models that worked for decades are no longer fit for today's talent and business realities. I think that's the first thing that we need to accept. Compensation is being reshaped not by one force, but by a convergence of three forces primarily. One is economic pressure, second is workforce transformation, and third is technological acceleration. India's talent landscape in 2026 reflects a structural shift from what we used to call role-based pay to skill-based pay, from uniform increments to more intentional differentiation, and even from annual cycles to continuous calibration, and from policy-driven pay to strategic rewards. So what's happening today is more related to what I would call the five converging forces. One is globalization and remote work. Today, you're seeing more and more organizations set up their shops here in India as GCCs. 63% of GCCs today hire for niche skills. Cross-border hiring has significantly increased with above market pay premiums. So there is a huge amount of globalization that's happening, and India is right at the center of it. And of course, the new ways of working where remote working is becoming more and more prevalent with every passing quarter, every passing year. Second force is there is a talent shortage. India has always had a demand and supply mismatch of good, employable, skilled talent in the market, and because of which premiums have existed in the way compensation is managed. So emerging tech roles, for example, can command up to 40% skill-based premiums, or even 50% in some cases. The third force is Gen Z and millennials, right? The Indian workforce is now predominantly being occupied by Gen Z, millennials, and soon Gen Alpha, where their expectation, their cultural alignment is more towards pay transparency, faster growth, flexibility, continuous feedback. And this generation evaluates organizations not just on how much they pay, but how fair, transparent, and meaningful those decisions are. Right? So pay transparency becomes extremely powerful. Fourth, there is inflation. I know it's moderated right now if I look at the current economic metrics, macroeconomic metrics, but employees' expectations around salaries have not, because today everybody looks at cost of living, because the country is primarily centered around tier 1, tier 2 cities where cost of living continues to go up. So employees now view increments less as a reward and more as a protection against lifestyle erosion. And finally, the fifth force is, 50 to 60% of large firms are using state-of-the-art AI for compensation planning. So pay equity, skill mapping, attrition dashboards are now becoming mainstream. And because of this data-driven decisions, organizations now have more flexibility to look at skill-based pay, to look at more customized total rewards across different genre of employees, to make it the most impactful as possible. Because previously it was one budget, you split it basis performance rating and market demand. But today you can cut and slice your budgets by type of worker, type of skill, demand from various parts of the business, and so on and so forth. So I think this is what's happening from a decision framework standpoint, where I think the skill capital is what we need to create first. Most organizations are focusing on building the entire skill taxonomy, skill infrastructure, job architecture, and basis that, then aligning the rewards architecture of the organization. But what I'm also seeing right now is a huge focus on outcome linked rewards that tie compensation to measurable business results. instead of keeping it very generic and focusing more on fixed pay. I think more and more organizations have moved over the last 3 to 4 years towards skill-based pay and performance-based pay, and I think that trend will continue. But there are new areas of rewards that are emerging in small pockets, like life cycle based rewards, ESG linked rewards frameworks, especially at the top management level, where you will start seeing rewards getting tailored to either career stages, life stages, or even ESG linked parameters. So a lot's happening, I think, in the reward space, which is following the entire talent evolution in the country. And I believe keeping skill at the center of that is what organizations will need to look to.
Thank you, Abhishek. Now, pivoting towards the employee expectations, with salary increments stabilizing, how are employee expectations around pay evolving, especially in terms of transparency, equity, flexibility, non-monetary benefits, and personalized rewards, and how organizations should respond to the same?
A great question. I think salary increments, as we all know, and basis our latest Future of Pay report, has stabilized around 9.1% projected for 2026, down from 9.6% in 24. But here's what's critical. While increments are moderated, employee expectations are not. The conversation has fundamentally shifted from how much more will I get to how fairly am I being treated, how transparent is the process of deciding someone's pay, and what's the total value I'm receiving. Because at the end of the day, when we look at 9.6, 9.1, these numbers are mostly alluding to, let's say, total cash compensation or fixed compensation, and not necessarily benefits or even long-term incentives that a lot of organizations have started adopting, like ESOPs and so on. So what is the total value that I'm receiving from an organization from a total reward standpoint is now becoming more and more prevalent. From a transparency standpoint, I think the question you asked, Pallavi, was how is it becoming more and more prevalent, especially in terms of transparency? I think because of the shift in the mix of employees in the workforce, with more Gen Zs and millennials coming in, I think they expect visibility into pay bands, progression criteria, and such. Organizations are responding by increasing transparency around pay structures. The shift is, trust us, we pay fairly, to, here's the data, decide for yourself how fair we are. And I think that move is slowly and steadily becoming prevalent in India. Pay equity has shifted from internal equity being the number 2 driver of attrition to number 5. But this isn't because it matters less. It's because recent pay corrections have addressed the most glaring gaps, but the perceived fairness continues to influence retention decisions significantly. But if you look at, let's say, what's driving voluntary attrition now, I think the top 5 drivers that we've at least understood from our research have reshuffled significantly from the past. I think limited growth opportunities has become number 1, up from number 4. It used to be the 4th most prevalent. Now it's number 1. Career acceleration and role mobility now outweigh pay increases. External compensation inequity has shifted to number 2 from number 1. And leadership effectiveness has emerged as a key driver, which essentially means poor managerial support, lack of development conversations are increasingly prompting more and more exits. So work environment as a whole, be it flexibility, culture, leadership, well-being expectations, are now a very, very critical lever in retention of critical talent. So that's how the entire attrition narrative is changing. So if we look at attrition statistics, for example, overall attrition moved from 17.5% in 24 to 16.4 in 25. Voluntary attrition account for 80% of the total exits. Financial services, by the way, if I look at an industry cut, financial services remains the highest at about 24%. GCCs demonstrate structural stability at about 14.1. But the cost of attrition, if I look through all of this data, cost of attrition has doubled to approximately 2x annual salary for every person lost. So it's becoming a very, very sensitive and a very competitive talent market. So it's important that we look at the factors, the 5 drivers I just spoke about, to maintain, healthy attrition, but not to kind of lose critical talent in the process, because it becomes very expensive to retain and to replace such people. The next point that I wanted to obviously highlight in this area, and I mentioned it before, was the benefits personalization journey. I think it's no longer just about cash, but the data that we are seeing is compelling, saying 78% of employees who we've kind of looked at across organizations have now started preferring personalized benefits. 92% of employers now offer mental health support. I think that number will soon touch 100. Employers are offering flexible benefits where they are ensuring much larger satisfaction by making sure that benefits are tailored for specific life cycle, specific career stage, and that's becoming a lot more acceptable to this mixed workforce population that we have. So it's moving more and more towards a cafeteria or a catalog style benefits model than what it used to be, which was a one size fits all. Just to give you an example, a 25-year-old may prioritize learning while a 40-year-old may prioritize childcare. So how are you providing this balance, and how are you making sure that the 40-year-old and the 25-year-old get what they want? Needs a lot of flexibility in your benefits plans, and that's what's, I think, slowly and steadily coming into the total rewards workforce, the total reward strategy. Now, in terms of, I think the other element which I spoke about, which was hybrid work, which is now becoming a reality, is that hybrid work has shifted from a pandemic response to a permanent operating model, and 52 to 53% organizations have already adopted hybrid models. 50% plus employees are willing to leave roles without flexible options because like the demand for good talent continues. And 68% of employees are affected by return to office mandates. They're saying, you know what, we don't want to go back to office because of multiple reasons. Because of it could be because of city commute. It could be because of the bulking population within office spaces. Because of home responsibilities that some of these individuals have taken on. And I think it is slowly and steadily also becoming a productivity question to say it is no longer just about people not being productive at home. And slowly and steadily with the technology advancement, people are becoming more productive at home. So how do you balance that? It's not just about attendance, but about your productivity impact and delivery that you can create in a hybrid environment, which is a very important, what I'm calling a total reward concept, and is very critical to hiring and retaining critical talent. So I would say, in a nutshell, transparency, how are you looking at attrition drivers? How are you looking at benefits personalization? And how are you looking at the new ways of working in terms of hybrid work, etc.? That is going to essentially drive, the future. And that's how organizations are responding to, employee expectations.
Thank you, Abhishek. Now, how can leaders balance cost discipline with the need to attract, retain, and motivate high impact talent, including the growing use of long term incentives, variable pay, and AI enabled compensation decision making?
Again, great question. And I think this is perhaps, at least in my opinion, the most pressing question for CHROs and CEOs today. And the answer lies in shifting from spending more to spending smarter. Look, in 2026, I think organizations are holding salary budget steady while sharpening differentiation. While the number remains around the 9% mark, the differentiation has become very stark to say people with the right skills, people with the right performance actually becomes a lot more dear to the organization and hence gets a lot more focus from a reward standpoint than others. Which is what is coming out today in most of our CHRO interviews and CEO interviews, that organizations are focusing on reskilling. Employees who are reskilling themselves to become more relevant for the company's future are going to get disproportionate amount of rewards getting directed towards them than others. And I think therefore organizations and their HR departments are deploying very targeted pay corrections, skill premiums, and performance-led rewards to balance competitiveness with cost discipline. But on the performance story, I think let's break it down into the performance story and let's say things like long-term incentives, the AI-enabled compensation decision making, the question that you asked. If I break this down, I think performance-based pay differentiation has been happening for some time, but I think it's becoming more and more stark. I believe that previously when an outstanding performer used to receive anywhere between, let's say, 1 to 1.2 times that of an average performer in terms of compensation hikes, this is now going to 1.6, 1.7, even double the hikes that average performer gets. So there is stark differentiation in the way performance defines compensation hikes at the end of the year in their merit cycles. Average variable pay, on the other hand, as a percentage of fixed pay, used to be at about 14% in 2024 to now almost 16% in 2025, signals a deliberate shift towards higher at-risk pay. And the fact of the matter is that if you look at India's population, if you look at our entire corporate population, 14.8 to 16.1 is a very stark movement. And with the billions that kind of add up in terms of compensation cost across Indian corporates, that's a very large, significant amount of value being set aside for variable pay. And payout dispersion also widely varies. So top performer earning between 120 to 150% of target, while average performers earning between 60 to 80%. So you see that the difference is almost double in terms of what amount of variable pay is paid. So performance-based differentiation is here to stay, and it is increasingly becoming sharper. Long-term incentive has had a strategic evolution. I'm sure, like from the days of Infosys almost a couple of decades back when ESOPs was a new thing, to the startup revolution in the last decade, where we've created so many lakhs and lakhs of dollar millionaires because of ESOP instruments. I think what's here to stay is the construct of wealth creation among employees, be it basis retention or be it basis performance. I think long-term incentive design has now become more strategic. In 2024, plans were predominantly retention-led, but in 2025, we see a more balanced focus on performance alignment, wealth creation, and even shareholder alignment in the way they design long-term incentives. So while ESOPs continues to be a very strong instrument in the way long-term incentives are built and are deployed in India, I think there is an increasing adoption of performance-based ESOPs or even RSUs being brought in as equity-based instruments to create wealth and to reward employees. Basis our survey, we realized that while ESOPs continues to be about 71% prevalent or 78% prevalent in 2025, RSUs have kind of maintained at about 15 to 16%. About 35% organizations are deploying one-time retention or sign-on LTI grants outside of regular award cycles to secure critical talent or in M&A or leadership transition situations. So I think equity-based pay is becoming more and more prevalent as we go from year to year. Especially in the executive compensation space, again, I think we are noticing a substantial, year-on-year increase from 12 to 15%. The structure is revealing that there is a compression on total fixed compensation. It is moving from, so if I look at the ratio of, or the pay mix, as I would call it, I think the fixed compensation for CEOs and CXOs are dropping from 30 to 25%. Short-term incentives are moving to 30-35%. And the remaining is coming through long-term incentives, which is 50%, so that they have more skin in the game. So pay at risk, essentially, if I look at long and short-term incentives, is 70% plus for CXOs, and that's moving in the right direction from a governance standpoint, which is a very fresh look at executive pay in this country. And finally, on the point of AI-enabled compensation decision making, I think some myths have to be busted. I don't think AI is reducing reward spend, first of all. I think a lot of people have asked me this question. Is AI reducing reward spend by being more optimal? It is not. I think it is forcing organizations to be more selective, dynamic, and defensible in how reward capital is allocated. So for every dollar spent in rewards, or every rupee spent in rewards, what is the ROI you're getting? I think AI is able to compute that in a much more efficient manner. So AI has moved from just being a pilot on analytics to an everyday use. So today, I think a large part of AI in compensation is becoming more and more prevalent around decision making, to say where should budgets be allocated, how should compensation be structured. The labor codes that have hit us as of November 2025 how are labor codes impacting rewards, and how is it affecting the compensation structure, the cash in hand for employees, various other regulatory elements. AI is actually helping build working models which are optimal around labor codes much faster. And I think that is also becoming a big trend that we are seeing in the market. But having said that, I think the challenge is that reward systems are today lagging AI-enabled work models because there is still a lot of static and a lot of lag indicator-based reward strategies still in play in the market, which is going to change, I believe, but is still fairly prevalent in the country. So things like annual cycles is still a very prevalent market trend. But skill-based pay, looking more future forward in terms of what skills are going to replace my current jobs, and hence how should I look at my reward strategy, I think is still restricted to a few industries, maybe technology industry, because there the disruption is maximum because of AI, whereas some of the other industries are still lagging behind. So I think the true use of AI in defining how should we pay for skills that are going to replace our current skills is, I would say, some distance away at this point in time. So that in a nutshell is what I think leaders are looking at in terms of balancing cost discipline versus new age thinking.
Thank you, Abhishek. Now, looking ahead, what does a future-ready compensation strategy looks like, particularly as AI and digital skills command premiums, analyticals shape career progression, and ESG and performance metrics influence executive and workforce pay?
Good question. I think future-ready compensation strategy in 2026 and beyond would be built on, in my opinion, four broad pillars. One is skills as the new currency. I just spoke about it, and I think I couldn't speak enough as to the importance of building a skill-based architecture and a skill becoming the new currency. Second is data as a decision engine. I think as organizations mature and start building better data structures and use that data and good AI models, good LLMs to take decisions and do better scenario planning using the data, I think that is what the future holds for us, even in terms of total rewards. ESG is the third element, and I think you asked that question. ESG is becoming a governance imperative, and I think if compensation, total rewards don't have the flavor of ESG, I think it is not future-proof. So ESG as a governance imperative is definitely going to feature in a future-ready compensation strategy. And finally, regulatory readiness as a comparative advantage, because as we are seeing, regulators are changing laws, changing codes, which could impact compensation, impact total rewards in various facets, be it the labor codes, be it income tax, be it ESG. There are a variety of regulatory, I would say, inputs that could affect that strategy. So anybody who's regulatorily ready as a compensation strategy will gain comparative advantage over the others. Now, if I were to elaborate on each of them, maybe I'll take 5 minutes. So skill-based pay, for example, I think organizations are operationalizing skill pay in a few ways, right? First is skill taxonomies are being embedded into the job architecture. Second is there is frequent recalibration. So skill premiums are now reviewed fairly regularly, like almost biannually, to say that is this skill still relevant or is this skill still deserving a premium? And third is there's a strong governance and transparency with a clear eligibility criteria, sunset clauses, and audit mechanisms. So skilling doesn't mean that we identify skills one-off. It is also about how do you keep refreshing the skill and how do you keep enabling people to fill those skill gaps using the right kind of learning, but also get incentivized with the right kind of premium. So it's a very powerful flywheel of sorts that will provide the organization the power of skills to keep growing in the future and to keep building comparative advantage. And the premium landscape is clear, right? So if I look at generative AI, ML, advanced analytics, they are nowadays attracting 40 to 50% premium on base skills. Like banking and financial services provide above market premiums for cybersecurity, AI risk, data governance, cloud architecture, platform engineering, and so on. So I think skills are evolving, and skill-based pay is not only here to stay, it is fast replacing traditional models. The second point, which is ESG, I think this is again a very hot topic right now because ESG was always regulated and has a lot of implications on the organization and its profitability, and how it is seen by regulators. But the rewards element has now started entering that conversation in a big way. So ESG integration in pay, especially with large Indian and global organization, comes in the form of embedding ESG metrics into executive incentives, your top leadership incentives, top leadership pay structures. Typically, what we've seen, the long-term incentives that are given to top executives, 5 to 20% of weightage comes from ESG metrics. And this is a very, very bold move and a very deliberate move towards creating ESG outcomes. And I think over a period of time, especially the social dimension, pay equity, fair wage practices, gender representation, will start factoring into weightages even for CXO -1 roles. And these are all connected to ESG outcomes. So this is a place which is worth watching out for because I believe this will continue to grow and proliferate. The next element is labor codes, of course. It is the talk of the town right now, hot topic. Most organizations are going through this transformation as we speak. But the new labor codes represent a fundamental restructuring of the comp framework where the construct of wages and inclusions and exclusions, where exclusions are capped at 50%, has a huge impact on how you look at retirement liability, like increased PF, gratuity, bonus, leave encashment. It has completely affected the way you even do full and final settlements at the end of the year for individuals, which has to be done fairly fast. So it has shaken up the foundation of total rewards in India, but I think it is moving in the right direction and with the right spirit in mind. And I believe over the next 3 to 4 months, we will get a lot more clarity. But this regulatory catalyst is another big, I would say, wake-up call for the total rewards professionals in the country, and how we look at salary structures, how we look at auditability of salary structures, how do we model cost impact of PF and gratuity, update payroll system with new calculations, how do we develop employee communication, because employees are the most confused right now, and then how do we track state-wise notifications for multi-state compliance for large organizations is going to be a very, very important factor for total rewards teams everywhere. The next is, I think, diversity and inclusion, from a rewards imperative is again becoming critical. I think it has again picked up pace of late. In 2026, we are seeing a huge focus on things like shifting value initiatives around LGBTQ plus inclusion, gender diversity in pay, age and generational diversity in pay, and how there are new audit structures that are coming into play to check for pay equity and inclusion in the total reward strategy, which is going to even decide EVP of an organization. And this is a very measurable metric, but it is coming to force in India. And finally, I think the CHRO action agenda that I want to leave everyone with is that leaders need to do the following pronto, right? One, they should look at the labor code restructuring impact, and they should assess the risks that they carry from a labor code standpoint, as of yesterday. Second, align the board and the CFO on the direction from a total reward strategy standpoint over the next few years, and even prepare employees from a systems and a process change standpoint. From a medium-term strategy standpoint, I think the focus would be integrating your total rewards design, variable pay, benefits optimization, and protecting critical talent through targeted interventions. Like I said, budgets won't change, but how do you structure that budget? How do you outlay that budget for various purposes? I think needs to change and needs to be rethought by the CHRO along with the CXOs. And finally, I think what I mentioned multiple times around the organization must shift towards skill-based pay structures and invest in an AI-ready workforce, especially with jobs changing rapidly because of AI, and building compensation frameworks that attract and retain AI skilled talent while preparing for a two-tiered organization. Two-tiered meaning digital workers and human workers. So that, in my mind, is what I would leave all of you with from a CHRO action agenda standpoint, short, medium, and long term.
Thank you, Abhishek. Now that brings us to the end of this episode of EY India Insights. Thank you so much for joining us and sparing your time, for sharing all the valuable insights on the changing dynamics of competitive compensation.
Thank you, Pallavi.
Thank you. And to all our listeners, thank you for listening. Stay tuned for more conversations on the trends shaping the future of work and business. Until next time, this is Pallavi signing off.